My son planned to put me in a nursing home, so I sold the house he thought was mine. The phone didn't click off, and that tiny mistake cracked my whole world open. I was rinsing a teacup when I heard my son's voice through the speaker, cheerful, professional, the version of him he uses for everyone except me. And then the cheer dropped like a mask and he said, "She can't live alone anymore. She's slow, forgetful. Honestly, it's time. He has to go to a nursing home." And another voice, his wife, whispered back, "Say he in case she's listening." And they both giggled because they think I'm deaf, old and harmless, which is funny because the title on the deed says otherwise. And while the sink water kept running and steam fogged the kitchen window, I stood perfectly still and listened to my only child plan my eviction from the life I built. He didn't hang up quickly either, he went on, outlining dates and numbers in a brisk tone. "We list it right after we get back from the trip. If she fights it, we tell the doctor to write the incapacity letter. We'll need liquid cash. The cabin rental is paid. We close fast. 900,000 easy in this market." And my hands started to shake. Not from fear, but from the clarity that slides into your bones when someone says they're about to throw you away like a broken umbrella. There are moments in life when you feel something inside you sit up and take the wheel, and this was one of them. Cold and precise and terribly awake. I reached over, tapped the phone off myself, and set it face down on the counter as if I were putting a child to bed, then took a long, slow breath that tasted like dish soap and mint tea and betrayal. Before I dive in, feel free to let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy the story, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. I didn't cry. I rinsed the cup, dried it, and stacked it with the others because routine steadies the nerves. Then I pulled open the drawer beside the fridge, where I keep the thin folder my father gave me the day I married. "For when people confuse kindness for weakness," he'd said. And inside that folder were 3 things. Proof the house was in a living trust with me as sole trustee, a letter from the lawyer explaining exactly how to sell without my son's consent, and a yellow sticky note in my father's handwriting that simply read, "Never announce a move, make a move." I sat at the table and reread the trust papers the way some women read love letters, letting each sentence wrap around my tired heart like armour, and when I finished I slid them back in and dialed the number of the realtor who'd been leaving her glossy cards under my door like confetti, a bright young woman named Priya who loved good lighting and firm close dates. "Can you come by today?" I asked. She was there within the hour, efficient, warm, noticing the crown moulding and the mature pear tree in the yard, speaking in numbers and timelines and staging jokes, and I nodded along, fingers steadying around a pen I hadn't used since my husband died. We priced it to pull multiple offers, cleaned the kitchen so the countertops shone like a mirror, and by evening, Priya had a private showing lined up with a cash buyer, a retired teacher with a small rescue dog who carried herself like someone who'd earned every square foot she stood on. My son texted that night. "We're leaving early tomorrow for the business trip. Be good, Mum. Don't try to cook. We'll talk about moving you when I get back. Love you." Love you. As if love sounded like a cage being locked politely. I typed back, "Travel safe," then turned the phone off and set it in a drawer beside the rubber bands. I pulled out the binder of house maintenance records, insurance, repairs, every receipt from the last 10 years. I laid them in a tidy stack for escrow because I am many things. Generous, patient, old, but I am not sloppy. The next morning I woke before dawn, brewed coffee and walked from room to room saying thank you to the walls that held me through widowhood, to the oak floor that took my footsteps when I paced at 2 a.m, to the window where I watched my granddaughter, no, I bite the word back, she is their daughter, draw chalk hearts on the driveway. I told the house I would find it a good keeper, someone who would not threaten it with strangers and clipboards and placement options. The showing went like a hymn. The buyer ran her palm along the banister and smiled. The little dog sneezed and wagged. Priya whispered, "We could close in 10 days," like a promise. The offer came by lunch, clean and strong, and I signed so neatly my second-grade teacher would have framed the signature. When the wire hit 3 days later, the bank teller looked up at me over her glasses and said, "Congratulations, ma'am," and I said, "Thank you, dear." And the electronic chime from my phone, a sound my son taught me to ignore because it always meant another login, another mom. Did you click the wrong thing again? Made a sound like a starting bell. Their business trip showed up on social media, of course, because people can't breathe without an audience now. There they were at a resort pool, holding drinks the colour of melted popsicles, hashtags about hustling and blessings prancing under the sun like trained dogs. Between photos, he texted me instructions like I was a plant he'd left in a window. Don't forget your pills, Mum. Don't wander. We'll look at facilities when we're back. If you go out, keep your phone on. Love you. Love you. I folded his messages into my silence and called my lawyer to finalise the trust distribution. New accounts to keep the funds invisible and safe. A small transfer to an account I labelled Pear Tree, because I like to name my money after living things. I paid off the last of the small debts they never asked me about and bought a light, bright apartment near the river where old women walked together at dawn wearing sneakers and soft smiles. I arranged movers, 2 college boys and a foreman who called me Ma'am like it was a medal, and I told them to leave the old recliner, the one my son always slumped into like a king surveying a tired kingdom. Take it to donation, I said. Someone else can do the slumping. While they packed, I wrote a note for my son and his wife on a plain white sheet of paper because some messages don't need fonts. It wasn't rageful. Rage wastes energy. It was clear, legal, and sharp enough to cut habits. You planned a nursing home for me. I planned a home for myself. This house was never yours. It has been sold for $900,000. Your key won't work. Do not attempt entry. All your items in the garage have been boxed and delivered to a storage unit. Here is the code. If you need copies of the trust, ask your lawyer, not me. When you speak to me next, do so with respect. Mum. I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it under the small iron pear that served as a doorstop. Symbolism matters. The closing day arrived the same way storms do. Quiet at first, then all at once. Priya handed me a small potted fern as a housewarming gift for the new place and said, with that bright confidence young people carry like a second spine, I'm proud of you. You set a boundary with a deed. That's art. I laughed, actually laughed, something I hadn't done in months, and we hugged in the empty living room as dust motes spun like confetti. After she left, I walked through one last time, fingertips brushing the doorway where we measured my son's height each year with pencil marks that he would later sand away when his wife declared them messy. In the kitchen, I wiped the sink and left it so dry it could have been a photograph, and then I locked the front door and slid the new key, my last copy, into a small velvet bag that came with a necklace my husband bought me years ago. I tied the bag shut and set it on the foyer table for the buyer to pick up. The movers loaded the final boxes. The rescue dog barked hello from the sidewalk, and I stepped into the taxi with the grace of someone who has chosen herself without apology. My new apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I put the fern on the windowsill and the folder in the new drawer and made myself a sandwich so perfect, ripe tomato, salt, cracked pepper, a good slice of cheese, that it felt like a ceremony. I ate standing up because sitting felt like landing, and I wasn't ready to land, not yet. I wanted to float above the city and listen to the hum of a life no one else scheduled. The afternoon slid toward evening, and I checked the delivery tracker. Yes, the storage unit had accepted the boxes. I texted the code to my son with a single line, "Your belongings are safe." He texted back 3 question marks, then nothing, then a thumbs up as if we were ordering takeout. I placed my phone face down again because I like the way silence sounds when it answers disrespect. Late that night, I sat on the edge of my new bed and made a list of the tiny ways they had been training me to disappear. Don't drive at night, Mom. Don't use cash. Don't cook. You'll forget the stove. Don't answer the door. Don't watch the news. It's too upsetting. Don't go to the garden club, those women gossip. Don't donate to the church. You don't know what they'll do with the money. Don't keep your old clothes. They smell like the past. Don't keep his tools. You'll hurt yourself. Don't. Until my life was an empty cup they were planning to put on a high shelf. I drew a line under the list and wrote, do, then scribbled the first do. Do go to the river at dawn. Do buy lilies for the table. Do call your friend Maribel and invite her to tea. Do sign up for the memoir workshop. Do wear the red coat even if it makes you look like a cardinal in winter. Do laugh. The list steadied me like a railing. On the 4th day of their trip, a neighbour texted me a photo of my front porch, my old front porch, and the envelope tucked under the iron pear. "They're back," she wrote. I didn't ask how she knew. News moves like water on our street. I thanked her and set my phone on vibrate. I boiled water for tea, peppermint this time because peppermint knows how to clear the head, and I stood at my kitchen window looking at the river's slow silver and tried to imagine his face when the key met the truth. It's a strange sensation, the moment you stop being the one who always forgives and start being the one who enforces the line. You don't grow fangs, you grow a spine. The kettle hissed, I poured, and while the tea steeped, I opened the little velvet bag and touched the key the way you'd touch a relic. We'd been each other's keeper, the house and I. Now we were both free. The call came 2 minutes later, an unknown number first. He was so sure I'd block him that he borrowed his wife's phone. I let it ring. Then his name lit the screen and I answered, calm as a lake. "Mum," he said, panting like he'd run up the front steps. "Mum, the key isn't... Why is there a note? This is some kind of misunderstanding, right? You wouldn't... Mum, open the door. We're standing here with our luggage. We just got back. We have a meeting in the morning. Mum, please." Please, like a trick door. I didn't speak. I wanted him to hear himself echo, to listen and learn. He filled the silence like a nervous salesman. "We can talk about the facility. It's a nice place. We got a discount. There's a piano in the lobby. You like music. Mum, we can fix this. Just open the door. We'll sort the paperwork. You can sign. Mum." I took a sip of tea and finally said, "I'm not at the house." He went quiet the way boys do when they realise the game is over and the grown-up isn't playing. "Where are you?" he asked, and the anger under the words glinted like metal. "Safe," I said, "and independent, the way you prefer to describe yourself on LinkedIn." He inhaled sharply. Then the phone rustled and his wife came on, voice sweet as a curtain. "Mother, this is ridiculous. You're confused. You'll be happier where there are people your age. We're just trying to help. Open the door so we can talk." I pictured her fake eyelashes batting at the ring camera and almost laughed. "Read the note," I said, carefully, twice. I hung up and switched the phone to airplane mode so only my breathing could find me. I shouldn't have watched, but I am human. I opened the neighbour's message thread and another photo arrived. My son on the porch with the note in his hand, his wife peering over his shoulder, both of them wearing the kind of smile you use for real estate photos. Forced, bright, expensive, and then frame by frame the smile slipped. His lips moved as he read my words, and the tendons in his throat stood out like ropes. She reached for the knob and tried the key again. Hard, like force. Could argue with a tumbler. Then she kicked the doorframe and hopped on one foot, and the neighbour, bless her, sent a final 5-second video. No sound, just the posture of two people realising they are not the main characters in someone else's story anymore. I set the phone down and let the tea do its work while the river kept sliding by, old as grief and newer than my courage. An hour later, I left my apartment and walked to the storage unit, just to check the boxes labelled with their names. I am fair even when I'm furious. Fairness is a muscle you keep strong for your own sake. The clerk nodded hello. I checked the lock, and everything was in place. The crystal vases she never washed properly, the golf clubs he used to ignore his daughter's school plays, the framed photo from our last real Christmas before the edits began. I stood in the fluorescent light and rehearsed what I would say if he ever asked why. You do not put your mother in a nursing home by ambush. You do not sell a roof out from under someone and call it planning. You do not confuse your convenience with my safety. But I knew he wouldn't ask why. He would ask how, because control cares about mechanics, not morality. I wrote another short note and taped it to the inside wall of the unit where they'd have to see it when they came with a pickup. You can fix furniture. You cannot fix entitlement. Grow up. The clerk smiled at me on the way out like he could smell justice on my coat. I walked home along the river, the dusk stroking the water into pewter, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been knotted for years. Not joy, exactly, but air. The kind of air you get when a storm moves on and the pressure lifts. I made soup, called Maribel, laughed about nothing, and climbed into bed with the window cracked open to the sound of the city humming like a lullaby. I wanted to sleep, but my phone vibrated against the nightstand. A text that somehow muscled through airplane mode because my neighbour had marked her messages emergency, and the preview read, "They're back at the porch, they just read your note. You need to see this." I exhaled, thumb hovering, and tapped the thread. The camera frame shook a little as she recorded from behind her curtain. My son wasn't angry anymore. Anger is energy, and he'd spent it. He looked small, boyish even, the way he used to look when a math problem stumped him. His wife pressed her lips into a thin line and shoved the phone into his chest like it had betrayed her. Then he did something I hadn't seen him do since he was 8 years old and broke the neighbour's window with a baseball. He knocked softly on the door that no longer belonged to him, and when no one came, he bent down, picked up my envelope, read it again, and then he turned to the camera. He didn't know it was there. And his mouth formed a word I never expected to hear from him ever again. Mum. The video ended as he stepped forward and pressed his forehead to the wood like it might forgive him if he were gentle enough, and my neighbour texted one last message. He's crying. I stared at the ceiling, the crack lines like rivers on a map, and felt the weight of a decision settle deeper into the bed with me. The screen lit again, this time with an unknown number that matched the area code of a law firm downtown, and the text read, "This is Attorney Brooks. Your son is requesting an urgent capacity evaluation. We would like to schedule a visit tomorrow morning." I smiled into the dark, not because it was funny, but because the next move he thought he owned was about to meet the move I had been saving for last, the one tucked behind my father's yellow sticky note like a queen behind a pawn. And as the city blinked its sleepy lights outside my window, I typed a reply I knew would pull every string they thought they were holding and tie it into a knot around their own hands, then hit send. And the moment the message whooshed away, footsteps echoed in my old hallway on the video. The knob rattled, and a new silhouette stepped into the porch light. The retired teacher, the new owner, her rescue dog at her heel, looking at my son and his wife with a calm that could slice marble. And she said 7 words that froze even my breath as I read my neighbour's captions. "Can I help you? You're trespassing. Leave now." The video my neighbour sent kept playing in my mind like an old reel, the new owner's voice smooth but unshakable. "Can I help you? You're trespassing. Leave now." Her rescue dog, tiny but fierce, stood at her side like a guard in miniature, tail stiff, eyes fixed on my son and his wife as if he could smell every bad intention on them. My son's wife stepped forward, plastering on the kind of smile she uses at charity events, the one that never touches her eyes, and said something I couldn't hear, but I could read her lips well enough. "We're family." The new owner tilted her head, unimpressed, and I caught her reply even without audio. "Not to me." Then she pointed toward the gate, calm as someone giving directions to the post office. My son gestured wildly toward the house, trying to talk over her, but she didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, just stood there in her own doorway with a spine made of iron and a hand on the leash. My neighbour's camera wobbled as she ducked back from the curtain, probably afraid they'd see her recording, and the video cut off. I stared at the last frozen frame, my son's face pale and furious, his wife's jaw tight enough to crack a tooth, and I realised they weren't just angry because they'd lost the house. They were humiliated, publicly. That, for them, was worse than losing money. The next morning, I woke to find a printed letter slipped under my apartment door. The return address was that law firm again. "Notice of intent," the heading read in thick, self-important type. The words underneath accused me of fraudulent disposal of shared property and unfit decision-making capacity, and demanded that I submit to a medical evaluation within 48 hours or face further legal remedies. I laughed out loud, real laughter, the kind that shakes loose dust in your lungs. Because not only was the house never theirs, but my father's trust paperwork was airtight. Still, the arrogance of it. My son thought he could drag me through an evaluation just to shake me, to rattle my sense of self until I'd hand him the money out of exhaustion. That's the problem with people who think they own you. They confuse inconvenience with victory. I made tea, peppermint again, and sat down to plan. First call was to my lawyer. "They're poking the wrong bear," he said after I read him the letter. "We can either respond politely with the trust documents, or we can respond with a warning shot that makes them regret opening their mouths." I thought for a moment. "Warning shot," I said, "but make it art." He chuckled like a man sharpening a knife. While he worked on that, I called Maribel. She listened, then whistled low. "They're going to push until something pushes back hard. You ready to go public?" My hand tightened around the phone. I'd been quiet all these years to protect the idea of family, even when the reality was rotting. But maybe sunlight was exactly what this situation needed. "If they want an audience," I said, "I'll give them one." That afternoon, the new owner called me. Yes, she had my number. I'd made sure she did before the sale closed. "I thought you should know," she said. "Your son and his wife came back again this morning. Tried to talk me into letting them in just to get a few things. I told them everything was in the storage unit, as per your note. Then they started getting loud, so I mentioned the police. They left, but not before saying something about fixing this through the courts." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the disgust under it. "Don't worry," I said. "They'll find the courts colder than they think." My lawyer's email came in just before sunset. The letter was a masterpiece. 2 pages dismantling every accusation, citing clauses from the trust, attaching proof of my mental fitness from my last physical, and ending with a single line that made me grin. "Further contact of this nature will be regarded as harassment and responded to accordingly." We sent it by email and certified mail. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. My son. I didn't pick up. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing their faces when they realised not only was the house gone, but so was their leverage over me. And yet, a knot twisted in my stomach. People like them don't just back off. They escalate. The question was how and when. I got my answer the next morning. My neighbour sent me another video. This time my son wasn't on the porch. He was in the driveway with 2 men I didn't recognise, unloading a U-Haul. My heart lurched, until I saw the banner. Estate liquidation sale. Tables covered in old furniture, lamps, knickknacks. My knickknacks. Not from the house. I'd taken all that. From the garage storage. The very boxes I'd put in the unit for them. He'd somehow gotten access, probably sweet-talked the clerk or lied about being the owner. I felt my face heat. The storage unit had a contract. Tampering with it was a criminal offence. I called the manager, who sounded horrified. "Mum, I swear we didn't let them in. I think they broke the lock." His voice dropped. "Do you want me to call the police?" Did I? Part of me wanted to march down there and drag every last thing back, just to watch their faces crumple. Another part wanted to let them sell it all and use the theft report as the final nail in whatever coffin their reputation had left. But this wasn't just about stuff. It was about the principle and the paper trail. "Yes," I said finally. "Call the police and keep the cameras rolling." By the time the patrol car pulled up, half the neighbourhood had wandered over, pretending to browse the tables while clearly enjoying the drama. My son's wife stood with her arms crossed, jaw tight, while my son argued with the officer, waving his hands like he was conducting an orchestra. I stayed home, watching it unfold via my neighbour's live feed. The officer took notes, inspected the broken lock the manager showed him, and then, oh, the poetry, started loading my things back into the U-Haul under police supervision. My son looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. His wife stormed off toward their car, muttering something that made the officer raise an eyebrow. That should have been enough satisfaction for one day. But then the officer knocked on my apartment door. "Ma'am," he said, I thought you'd want to know. They've been served a no trespass order for the storage facility and your former property. If they set foot there again, they'll be arrested. He handed me a copy for my records. I thanked him, closed the door and set the paper on my table. It felt like a small shield, light but sturdy. I made another cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the river catch the late afternoon light. For the first time in weeks, I felt, not safe exactly, but steady. Like I could breathe without checking over my shoulder. That's when the envelope slid under my door. No return address this time, just a single sheet of paper, handwritten in my son's familiar scrawl. You've made your point, but you've also made an enemy. Watch yourself. The tea went cold in my hand. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. I set the note down, my mind already shifting into the same cold clarity I'd felt the day I overheard that first phone call. If he wanted a war, I'd fight it on my terms, quietly, precisely, without mercy, and I knew exactly where to start. The note lay on my table like a snake coiled to strike. You've made your point, but you've also made an enemy. Watch yourself. It wasn't just a threat. It was his way of telling me he was done hiding behind polite words. I ran my fingertips over the paper, memorizing the pressure of his pen strokes, the little hooks at the ends of certain letters, the kind of detail only someone who's been watching you their whole life can put into writing. And I realized something. He'd slipped it under my door himself. That meant he'd been in my building on my floor. He was closing the distance. The first thing I did was call the building manager and have the front security footage pulled. There he was at 7:12 p.m, walking in with his baseball cap pulled low, no wife in sight, head down like a man trying to blend into the wallpaper. He didn't even glance at the camera. That, more than anything, told me he was confident no one would hold him accountable. That's when the decision stopped being about revenge and became about something else entirely, ending this. I called the new owner of my old house, the retired teacher with the rescue dog. You still have those porch cameras running? I asked. She did. Not only that, she'd been collecting footage of every time my son and his wife came back to loiter or argue on the lawn. She offered to email it all to me. I told her yes, and thank you. When it arrived, I watched each clip in order, building a quiet, perfect case. Trespassing, harassment, attempted unlawful entry, even a shot of him trying to peer through the windows at night. The next step was the police. I took everything, her videos, my building's footage, the threatening note, and handed it over in a neat folder. The officer on duty flipped through it slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, this isn't just a family dispute anymore," he said. "This is stalking and harassment. Do you want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. By the next morning, the restraining order was in motion, and my son was served at his own front door. My neighbour, bless her need for neighbourhood updates, texted me the play-by-play. He looked shocked, then mad, then slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. His wife's voice could be heard inside, high and sharp, like she was blaming him for losing control of the situation. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end. But when someone is used to controlling you, they don't understand what to do when the leash snaps. That weekend, I got a call from my lawyer. "You're going to like this," he said, his voice almost smug. Their lawyer reached out to discuss a settlement. My eyebrows went up. Settlement for what? For everything, he said. They want to agree to stay away, drop any legal action, and in exchange they're asking for money. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Tell them no. Tell them not only am I not paying them, but if they so much as send me another letter, I'll have them in court for damages and make sure they know I'm serious. He did. And this time there was no counteroffer. Just silence. For weeks, life began to settle. My apartment became home. I started going to the river in the mornings, joined a book club, even baked a pie for the building's potluck. But I kept my guard up until one crisp Sunday morning when I decided to walk past my old house just to see it one more time. The pear tree was in bloom, the curtains were different, and the rescue dog was sunbathing on the porch. The new owner waved from her rocking chair. I walked up the path, and she handed me an envelope. "Found this stuck in my mailbox last week," she said. "Figured it was meant for you." Inside was a check. My son's handwriting again, but this time shaky, like he'd written it fast. The amount, $900,000, in the memo line, for the house. My throat tightened, but not from sentiment. This wasn't an apology. It was an attempt to buy back power, to rewrite history as if I'd sold it to him directly. I folded the check in half and handed it back. "Tell him I said no," I told her. She smiled like she'd been hoping I'd say that. Already did. That night, as the city quieted outside my window, I took out my father's yellow sticky note. "Never announce a move, make a move," and pressed it into the back of my journal. This war had started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear, and it had ended exactly the way it should, with them locked out of a life they thought they could own. The house was gone, the control was gone, and I was still here. The last text I ever got from my son came 2 weeks later. 4 words. "We should talk, Dad's birthday." I didn't respond. I deleted it. Some doors, once shut, are better left that way. Because in the end, it wasn't about the house at all. It was about reminding them, and myself, that I am not a piece of property to be managed, sold, or stored away. I am the deed, I am the trust, and I hold the only key that matters.